Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Of course, we've been talking a lot about China, Joe Biden, and all his executive orders, and I'm going to keep on reminding folks that this is the same guy who, as a candidate, he may not remember this now, you know how his memory is lately, but as a candidate, he was saying that anybody who just works through executive orders and not through legislation or primarily through executive orders, why, that's no better than a dictator. Well, Dictator Joe has signed dozens of these things now, and he's probably going to sign dozens more. The big question for Americans, probably at least initially, should be, are they legal? Are they constitutional? I thought I'd put that question to Lora Ries, who's a senior research fellow for Homeland Security at the Heritage Foundation. Laura, welcome back to the program, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me again, Lars.
So I know that at least one or two of these has been struck down by federal judges, and of course that'll give the Biden administration a little bit of a taste of their own medicine after Donald Trump faced ongoing and constant challenges to everything he did, even things he did based on federal law and not based on executive orders. But how many of these things could be said to be actually constitutional and legal? Do we have any rough idea of the ones he's signed so far?
Well, the common tactic that we faced when I was in the Trump administration, particularly in the immigration context, was the opposition would claim there was insufficient use of the Administrative Procedures Act. So it was always a procedural flag that they threw up. And in the case that I had just written about, where the acting secretary now of the Department of Homeland Security within the Biden administration had ordered suspension of deportations for 100 days. And the immigration statute requires that people with final orders of removal shall be removed. So that can't be ignored. And fortunately, the Texas Attorney General sued against the suspension order and did receive a temporary restraining order or injunction from the U.S. District Judge down there saying, no, Biden administration, you cannot suspend these for 100 days. So hopefully where there's been inappropriate notice and public response, others will sue as well to get some good implementation and leadership around these changes.
Let me ask you something, because I know there's no way for you to know this absolutely, but I have a feeling the Biden team has lawyers just like every president has lawyers, and that they get some decent legal advice. And I know that there are times where a lawyer will tell a client, well, what you're suggesting is not entirely true, but you might go, I've actually got memos from lawyers that wrote them for government agencies that said this isn't legal, what you're doing, but you can probably get away with it until somebody decides to spend the time and effort and money to actually challenge it. I mean, there are lawyers that I guess will give that kind of advice. Do you think that when they walked in and said, we can take an executive order and effectively say, not just effectively, explicitly say, we're going to violate the law. We're going to take people who've been ordered to be deported. The federal law calls for them to be deported, and we can reverse that with an executive order rather than having to go change the law over on Capitol Hill. Did they know this in advance, or do you suspect that they knew it and just thought, we'll do it until we're challenged? And when we're challenged, we'll probably appeal the challenge, and we'll play that game. Are they doing it, or are they really folks who didn't have any idea that you can't stop a federal law by having the president sign his name to a piece of paper?
So I would imagine that, the lawyers there considered it, but the lawyer's not the client. And so if the client decides, yep, I heard your advice, I realize there might be a risk in court on this, I'll take my chances and move forward anyway.
Well, but in the case of the president's oath, most of the oath talks about supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, but some of it talks about faithfully executing. Well, in that case, if you're the head of the executive and the Congress has written a law saying when somebody does these things and they are found to be deportable, that you should deport them, isn't the president violating his oath if he's not faithfully executing the laws of the United States?
I would agree with that statement, yes.
And yet you have to take him to court to get that done. And so in this case, I know that there was a lot of talk when you were working at the Trump administration, oh, this president's out of control. But I pointed out to people, he didn't use nearly the same number of executive orders, and I thought most of his were appropriate, and I called him out when I thought he wasn't doing it appropriately, that there are things you need to change through legislation. And if you can't get them changed through legislation, then you're stuck. I mean, when the president first came in and he said, I'm going to build a wall, goes to Congress, says, I want to get the funding for a wall. Paul Ryan kind of, I think, sold him out and didn't actually press that case. But he couldn't get the money through Congress. That doesn't mean he just says, well, I'll issue an executive order to get the money somehow. What he did was he found the money other places, but did it in a way that the courts decided were entirely legal. This president, if anything, is far more out of control if you say he's going to run around doing things that even he knows are illegal until somebody challenges him. That to me is, and I think the press corps ought to be calling him out on it. But I don't think this press corps is likely to do that.
Well, and even if they were, now they have to submit their questions in advance. So I don't know if the press secretary would call on them. But
Laura,
right.
Sorry.
This president has hit a new record on the number of EOs, and we're only into his second week. And just on immigration alone, he has really turned the system upside down and placed illegal immigrants above legal immigrants above U.S. citizens. He's put Americans last, and it's frustrating. And yes, he swore to protect this country and Americans, not everybody else.
As I understand it, he's even said that illegals will get preference on when it comes to the vaccine for the COVID.
They are pressing that anyone be given the vaccine regardless of their immigration status. So, yes, the net result of that is as people struggle to make appointments for their elderly parents, taxpayers who paid for these vaccines, you can have someone who is here unlawfully get the vaccine before your own tax-paying U.S. citizen, yes.
I would just love, I've actually made today's Twitter poll that we put up a poll question every day and said, should any reporter ever submit questions in advance? Laura, I've been a journalist for more than 40 years. I've always routinely said no to that, period. Just if somebody asks, they'll say, will you tell me what you want to talk about? I say, yeah, I want to talk about COVID vaccine. And they say, well, submit your questions. I say, no, I don't do that. Because the minute you do that, you give up editorial control to the people you're about to interview. And I've never done it in my career, and I'll never do it ever again. But apparently this White House and this press corps operates on a whole different set of rules. Laura, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for what you do.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.